Welcome to part 8 of our Galaga tutorial. In the last couple parts, we created enemies, we got the enemies so that they're cleaned up when they leave the screen, and we made sure the player was linked to the scene or limited to this screen so it couldn't leave it. What we're going to be doing now is we're going to be adding a shooting. So we're going to get our player to actually shoot little bullets, and then we're going to get those little bullets to be able to damage and destroy the enemies from there. So a little bit of a couple of notes before we start this. One of the things that we want to do is we want to be careful to structure our scenes well. What we're going to do is we're going to have it so our player has a weapon scene as a child of that player in the scene. That weapon scene we could then swap out. So we're going to set up a weapon scene that could have different properties. Maybe it does more damage or it shoots faster or something like that. That weapon scene is then going to shoot a bullet. That bullet should be its own scene as well, because the bullet might have different properties. Maybe we want to make a laser, or maybe we want to make a missile or something like that that tracks the enemy or something. But we're going to get all of those properties in there, and we need to structure our code and structure our scenes well so that we can extend this later. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to create a scene for these weapons. So I'm going to go into my file system here. I'm going to go find the scenes folder and use my favorite way to create a new scene. Right click on it, create new scene. And we're going to name it weapon. We can leave it as a 2D scene right now. We're going to need to change it in a minute. So actually this one we're not going to. Our weapon's never going to move. It's just going to be attached to our player, so that's kind of all we need. It will need position information, but it won't actually need any other information here. So just node 2D is great as the start there. I'm just going to save that just to make sure. One of the nice things, by the way, about creating your scenes from right-clicking on the scenes folder here is it creates and saves the scene in the correct folder already, like as the very first thing that you do. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to add a timer here. Something that we're going to need. I'm going to name this reload timer, just like that. And I'm going to go over here. I'm going to check one shot. I'm going to set the wait time to 0.2 seconds. This timer is going to be here, so this is how long our weapon takes to reload. Yeah. We can adjust this later. This is a really nice, easy one to adjust later. And we go from there. Now, we're going to go to our weapon, to the root node here. And I'm going to add a script to it. Just leave it as weapon.gd. And this is going to bring us into our code here. We're going to need some variables here to control our weapon stuff. So I'm going to go at export var reload time. I'm going to make that a float, which is 0.2. And we need to know what the bullet. So this is going to be a place that we can where we can figure out what the bullet is. We can link the bullet to the weapon and tell the weapon, here's what you're actually shooting. Okay? The reload time is going to be a float here. Should be pretty easy. This is going to be an export var, so we can change it later, or we might be able to change it in code later if we need to. We're also going to need to know the damage. This could be a float 2. And I'm just going to make it 1 damage for now. That's a good enough placeholder value. Bullet speed. I'm going to make it 1,000. And we're going to make a variable to store if we have been reloaded. Notice that I'm not making this an export variable because I don't actually want to start off, or I don't want to be able to change the properties of whether I'm reloaded or not. I want it to just start off reloaded, so when I create my weapon, it starts reloaded. You can see here that I've got some of these properties from these export variables showing up in my inspector here, and I'll use those later as we go through. First thing I want to do is in the ready function here, I'm going to set up the timer. Reload timer dot wait time equals reload time. You may notice that I didn't need to set the wait time on the actual reload timer node, and that's true. I'm doing it here in code, so I didn't need to. I did just because of force of habit. Next thing we want to do is I want to connect this reload timer. So I'm going to go to the node tab here to timeout, double click. It's going to bring me to this connect to signal thing here. And it's going to do this, which is going to connect that reload timer signal to the reload timer timeout function that it created here. In this here, I'm going to go reloaded is true. And that's it. When the reload timer ticks, it's just going to say, yep, I'm reloaded. And that's all it needs to do. We could, like, maybe later we'd want to have some graphics that show that it's reloaded or something like that, but I don't need to. All it needs to do is just say, yep, reloaded. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a function at the bottom of this for shooting. We're going to create our own function here. So this should, there we go, I'll just go and add a couple more lines here to make it a little easier to see. This function here is actually going to be doing the legwork of shooting. Okay, so first off, if we are reloaded, I can just go if reloaded. Reloaded is going to be either true or false, so I don't need to check if it's true. It's just going to be true or false. Then I'm going to create a bullet. We're going to instantiate here. Instantiating is what we do when we create a new copy, a new instance of a scene or an object in programming. In Godot, these are called scenes. In any other programming language, they're called objects or classes. So what we're doing is we're creating a copy of the bullet scene. We haven't created the bullet scene yet, but the weapon doesn't need to know that. The weapon just says, whatever the bullet that I'm using is, create a copy of it using instantiate. I'm going to store it in a variable b, then I'm going to set some properties. Bullet damage equals damage. I need to add that. b.bullet speed equals bullet speed. And we're going to spawn this set the position of this b.global transform equals global transform. This is an interesting one. I'm kind of doing this a little bit backwards here. I should probably create the bullet scene first and then set the properties of the bullet scene, because normally I wouldn't be guaranteed that the bullet actually has a bullet damage and a bullet speed. So normally I should create the bullet first, logically. Then I could go here and say, oh yeah, I know what I used for these property values and set them from there. However, you know what? I know I'm going to do it this way. So I'm okay with being a little bit slacker here for that. So our next thing, we are setting the transform of that. All we're doing here is we're setting the bullet to be at the same place as the weapon. Then get tree dot get tree dot get root dot call deferred add child b. What this line does here, get tree gets the current scene tree, including all of the scene tree in there, so it goes right back up to main scene. Get root gets the absolute root of that. The reason I want to do it this way is because I don't want to add the bullet into the weapon scene. I want to add the bullet into the main scene where I've got everything else happening, right? This way the bullets persist if the weapon gets switched or something like that, and the bullets aren't linked, like they're shot by the weapon, but they're not added to the weapon. Again, call deferred adds it after the current physics step, so that's good. We are going to set reloaded as false because we just shot. And now we're going to set reload timer, so we're going to take reload timer and just start it. When reload timer is done and when it ticks, it's going to tell me that we're reloaded, and we can go from there. That's all we've got. So make sure to save your weapon code here. We're going to now create a scene for the bullet. I'm going to do the same thing. Create new scene. I'm going to name it bullet.tscene. Here we go. this bullet is going to have to move. Our weapon is not going to have to move. Our bullet is going to have to move, so it's going to need to be a different type. So I'm going to right-click on it and change type, and I want to make it a character body. Let's go to our 2D view here. So this is our bullet scene here. It's got a whole lot of nothing in it. So let's go and add a bullet. I'm going to choose bullet small.png, and I'm going to drag it in here, something like that. I'm actually going to reset the transform so it's actually at 0, 0 there. And actually, no, I'm going to drag it a little bit down because I think that the tip of the bullet here is actually where we're going to want to be, like where we're going to detect if we hit something with. Okay? So this is the center of the bullet. This is sort of a trail is what I'm seeing this as. Okay? Maybe 1 or 2 up there. So I've got it 0 and 6 there. I'm going to go and add another collision shape. Please note that you should have bullet selected when you add this collision shape, so this collision shape is a child of bullet. You'll know that if you still have the yellow triangle here, that it's giving you an error, and so that it won't work for that. Collision shape needs a collision shape. I'm just going to make it a circle because it's fast. I'm going to make that circle the size of the sort of the tip of the bullet here, and that'll do. That's good enough. That's all we got to do. Alrighty. Let's go up to the bullet root node here, and we know that we've been dealing with collision layers here. So I'm going to set this, it should be on the player layer. It should collide with enemies, but it should not collide with the player. Okay? I actually don't want this to collide with the borders either because I don't want the bullets bouncing off the fences that we made for the player here. Okay? When we shoot our bullets, we know that our bullets are going to continue on. They're going to leave the screen at some point if we miss. So let's add a timer here, and I'm going to rename this one to life timer. I'm going to set the wait time to, let's say, about 2 seconds. And it's going to be one shot. It's going to be auto start. What we're going to do is with this bullet timer, when 2 seconds have passed, it's going to clean up the bullet so that if we miss everything, it'll just shoot off into space and then it'll be removed by itself. Okay? This is a nice thing for bullets because we know they're going to continue. We know a lot of them are going to leave the screen, so let's plan for that ahead of time. Okay, our bullet here, our bullet's root node is going to need a script, so connect a script, just bullet.gd. And here's our script for this. We're going to need to add bullet speed is 1. Bullet damage is 1. You may notice, one, I was careful to make sure that I spelled that the same way I did in the weapon code here, right? As I said, I should have done the bullet first, but this is good enough. So these are the same as they are in the bullet here. You may notice I'm also not exporting the speed and the damage. I'm just setting them to 1. It's good enough. The reason I'm not exporting the bullet speed and damage is because I want the weapon to set these. I want these to be properties of the weapon as we're running this game here, so that the bullet is just there for the graphics and the motion. Okay? The weapon will tell the bullet how much damage to do. Okay. In our ready function, what I'm going to do, velocity is negative transform dot y times bullet speed. Okay. If I look here at my bullet, the y direction is up and down. Negative y direction is up, positive y direction is down, right? In my code here, if I go back to my code, I'm saying get me the transforms y direction. This is really useful because the transforms y direction we can adjust if the bullet's been rotated. So if the bullet's been rotated, that y direction local for the bullet will be in a different direction. And then I can just take that, which is going to be just 0, -1, rotated by the bullet, and then just multiply it by the bullet speed. That just gets me my velocity. That's all I need to do. I'm going to add in a physics process function here because the bullet is moving, so I should adjust, or I should deal with it in the physics process section here. So here's what I'm going to do. Var collision is move and collide. And I'm going to go velocity times delta. Move and collide we've seen before. It moves and then it collides. It detects collision with other objects, whether that's a border or whether that's a player or an enemy, whatever it is allowed to collide with. So in this case, bullets can collide with enemies, and that's it. And if it does collide with something, it's going to spit out what it collided with into this variable, this collision variable here. Now I'm going to go if collision. I can just go if collision because GD script, like Python, and like a couple other things, it will say if there's nothing in that collision variable, it's going to evaluate as false. If there is something in that collision variable, it will evaluate as true. So if we have collided with anything, it will return true here by doing if and then that. And then I can go get what we collided with. So the collision.getCollider gets what we collided with. The collision is actually the collision event. The getCollider says, what did we hit? And then I'm going to do this for testing. And we can remove it later. Print bullet hit. Oopsies. Body.name. There we go. And I'm going to queue free. Calling queue free like this, just without anything in front of it, says delete this thing that the script is currently attached to. So in this case, what it means is when the bullet hits something, so if the bullet hits something, then get what it hit, print out the name of the thing it hits, and then delete the bullet. Okay? We could add more stuff in here, right? When we collide with something, I could add stuff like an explosion. Like maybe I want the bullet to spawn a hit effect or something like that. That could look really kind of cool, but that would do it in here. Like I'd spawn that in this location here. Okay. From there, let's also go to our life timer. And I'm going to add a connection to timeout here. Just double click connect. We're good. On life timer timeout, what I'm going to do is just reached end of life. So this bullet has reached its end of its lifetime, and so all we're going to do is queue free. Just like that. That's it. Yep. All right. So our bullet is set up. Our bullet knows how to move. Our bullet can be spawned. Our weapon here knows how to shoot and knows how to reload, which is great. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to the weapon scene here. And I'm going to go to the inspector here, and I could drag the bullet in here sort of for the default bullet. So whenever I add a weapon to a player or an enemy, it will always shoot this bullet by default. Okay, so all I'm going to do is just, I have weapon selected here as the root node in my scene. I'm dragging the bullet.tscn file from the file system and bringing it over here into the bullet property in the inspector window here and just dropping it. You can see it shows up right here. And there we go. I can still change this later. So if I want a different weapon to shoot a different bullet, I can change that for that weapon. But this way, if I add a weapon to the player or an enemy, it has a bullet by default that it can use. Okay? Next thing we're going to do is go to our player. We've got the player here, but we're going to need to add some code in here so that the player can actually shoot. Let's go bind a key for that. So product settings, input map. And I'm going to just add a shoot. And I'm going to add in left mouse button. I'm also going to add in space. Just because either one might work. Space or left mouse button should be fine. Okay. Alrighty. And let's go back to our player here. And I'm going to drag the weapon.tscn, into the scene tree here. I just dragged it up and just let it go on the player root node here, and it adds it in here. You can see it's got a reload time, it's got a bullet, it's got a damage, got a bullet speed, all the default values, and that's it. Okay. And there we go. We're going to save this. We do need to actually go and add the code to make it so that the player can shoot. So I'm going to go to the player's script here. I need to add a variable at the top here, and it's going to be onReady var current weapon equals $weapon. This will probably need to change later. If we want to be able to change weapons, then I would want this to point to whatever our current weapon is. But maybe I could spawn in 2 or 3 different weapons, and then I could switch between them. Or maybe when I pick up a weapon, it gets rid of my current one and adds the new one in there, which is fine. This is pretty straightforward here. This is just so that I don't have to change this in code later. I can just change this variable here, and I can even change this variable from other code. So if a weapon pickup, for example, say the player hits a weapon pickup, it can then just change this variable, and it would be able to shoot that. Okay? In my process function here, I'm just going to go if input.isActionPressed, and then shoot. Easy as that. Input.isActionPressed detects, is this action pressed? So are you holding down the mouse button, or are you holding down the space bar? We're not checking to see if we've pressed and released it, or if we've pushed it down, and then, however it ends up being, because you don't want to be able to spam the button and click really quickly. The way we've set this up is that you hold the button and it shoots when it's reloaded. It's easy as that. We could make it so that it waits until you click a second time, but that's not the game we're making. We want this to be sort of fully auto. It's going to shoot every time it's reloaded and go from there. And then all I need to do is current weapon. So talk to my current weapon dot shoot. There we go. Save your work. Run the game. I can move my ship. And you can see I can shoot. Hooray! You may also notice that when I hit an enemy, you can see the bullets disappear, which is great. And I get a little notification here in the output window that the bullet hit the enemy. Or a bullet hit whatever it's talking to there. It's just bullet hit enemy or hit a different character or whatever it was. So it's detecting that it hit the enemy already, and it's working great. That's kind of all we need to do there. We're working, it's shooting, it's great. All right, the next part that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to actually go and get our bullets to do damage to the enemy. Our bullets are shooting, and they're reloading great, and they're flying great, and our weapon works. But now we need to go to the enemy and actually add code to track the enemy's health. So go over to the enemy script here, or the enemy scene, and we're going to look for the enemy script. And our enemy needs to know a couple things. We're going to need to track things. We're going to go export var max HP. And it's going to be a float. And I'm going to start it at 2 hit points, just because. I'm also going to do var current HP is a float. I don't want to export my current hit points. What we're going to do is we're going to set our current hit points. So in the ready function here, I'm going to go current HP equals max HP. So when this enemy spawns, it's going to set its current hit points to whatever the maximum hit points of this enemy is. It's going to be 2 by default. When the enemy spawns, it means it sets its current hit points, but we don't want to necessarily spawn it with like half health. That'd be a little bit weird. Okay, maybe in a different game, but not in the game we're doing right now. We need to go, and our enemy knows its own health now, but can't take damage. Let's go down to the bottom of your script here. Func take damage. There we go. We've made a new function that allows us to take damage. And we're going to do current HP minus equals damage. There. We've subtracted the damage from our health. That's all we got to do. I'm going to do a little bit here. I want to put in a line here to print out that the enemy did actually take damage so that I can test it. I should go and remove these later or comment them out later, but it's nice to sort of see if this actually worked for something we can't necessarily see as we don't get good feedback on. So I can go print, and I'm going to go enemy took %s damage, current HP %s / %s. All right, this is called a formatted string, and what I'm doing here, current HP and max HP. What I'm doing here with this line is let me actually make this just a little wider so you can see the whole line here. I'm printing out a string. This is a neat trick where I can write the string a little bit easier than adding all the pluses in there to concatenate things. And what it's going to do is these things here, this list of variables here at the end is going to be what it's going to slot into these places where it has the %s. %s means it's going to turn it into a string. Go from there. That's just for testing. You can comment it later. We also want to clamp our health so that we can't go below 0. Negative. So I'm going to go clamp current HP 0 max HP. What this is going to do is going to take our current hit points and it's going to make sure that it limits it to between 0 and max hit points. And what we're going to need to do, we're also going to need to set our current HP. Oopsies. There we go. So we're going to clamp our hit points to be somewhere between 0 and our maximum hit points. That means that we can't go negative, we can't go above our maximum. That's useful for a lot of things here. Our hit points can't go negative. If we're 0, we should die. So if current HP is less than or equal to 0, die. Oh no. You know what? We're going to need to make a function for that too. So when I'm breaking this out into a separate function here because there might be different reasons that our player might die, right? Or sorry, that this enemy might die. It might be that the enemy hits something else or whatever it is, or maybe, for example, I want the enemies to all die when we beat the level or something like that. So I'm going to separate this out. It's also good practice to separate these things out and separate these concepts out because taking damage is a separate sort of concept from dying. So, enemy died. Again, I'm going to put this in there for testing. We could put an explosion here. That might be nice. Maybe do that later. And then we're going to queue free. Delete me. There we go. So the die function right now doesn't really do anything other than just prints out enemy died and then removes this enemy. We could do lots more later, but that's all we're going to do right now. So we can take damage. We know that. We can die. Our enemy can die here, and we've got that. And we should be good. Our enemy can now take damage. Our enemy knows its own hit points and all that sort of stuff. But let's go to our bullet code And let's make it so that the bullet can actually damage the enemy. So here's where we've got the bullet hit something here. Bullet detected that it hit something and printed out what it hit. So what we're going to do is we're going to check to see, first off, we're going to check if body.has method take damage. We're going to check to see if the thing we hit can be damaged. Right now, it shouldn't be an issue. Like the only thing that this bullet can hit is the enemy, but we might screw something up later. Like we might have an asteroid that's accidentally on the enemy levels, but can't take damage. Or something, like the enemy layers, but can't take damage. Something like that. This is insurance so that when we hit something, we go, yeah, but can I actually do damage to the thing I can hit? If we try and call take damage, so if I try and go body.take damage, take the amount of damage of this bullet, if I tried to do that without checking to see if the body has that method, it would probably work. But if I mess something up, it might crash. So this is sort of insurance to say later on, this is going to prevent a problem from happening if I make a mistake later. All right, so let's see what we've got here. Let's see if this works. I can move, I can shoot. And if you look here, boom, boom. And I'm actually going to end the game right now. Look at what we got here in our output. So you can see here, the bullet hit the enemy. The enemy took 1 damage, and it printed out its current hit points. Then a second bullet hit the enemy. It took 1 damage. Its current hit points were 0 out of 2, and the enemy died, which is exactly what I want to see. That's working exactly the way I want it to work. I can test it again here. Pow, pow, pow. Yep. I hit them twice, and the enemy's removed. Yay! And if you can also notice, I can hold down the mouse button instead of clicking it quickly, and it just shoots. Yay! There we go. Awesome. Our game is working. We're doing pretty good here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to go and comment out a couple of these things. Control K on your keyboard is comment out. So if I just click on the line and hit Control K, it comments it out. I don't need that there. So this testing line in bullet. I'm going to go to the enemy here, and I'm going to comment out these lines here because I don't need them in there. I don't need this feedback because I know it's working. I'm not going to remove them. I'm just going to comment them. They don't do anything when they're commented. Okay. There we go. Our player is shooting, and our enemies can be destroyed, and they can take damage, and we can go from there. Got lots of stuff there. After this, we need to get the enemies shooting back at the player and go from there. Unfortunately, we can reuse a bunch of our code for that, but that will be in the next tutorial. Have a great day. See you in the next bit.